All right, happy Friday. Welcome back to the LionHeart Radio SideShow. Feels good to finally be back on the tracks with George Briones. He is the head programmer over at Sofleet, and I think he's probably one of the top minds in programming right now, and so it's always a great opportunity when I get to sit down and pick his brain and talk about life. For those of you that are new to this, we do, on the LionHeart Radio SideShow, we do talk about life a little more than sport, but typically how the two interchange. If this is your first time listening, my name is Rick Alexander, and I host the LionHeart Radio channel. I've got a short form show that I do 3 to 5 times a week called Morning Coffee, which is typically more of a lifestyle development type show. We've got the long form conversation LionHeart Radio, where I interview a thought leader, coach, athlete, entrepreneur. And then we have the side show where me and George sort of sit down and talk about life. So that pretty much catches you up. Today we are talking about the difference between fact and research-based versus anecdotal-based evidence and how those play into your lives, and as an athlete, as a coach, as a human being, how you can use those to progress the best that you can in life. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's always an insightful one on the side show, so I hope that you guys enjoy listening. Without further ado, on to the show. So this is something I've been really interested in because I've been obviously like writing my new book and thinking about all these different things. And I'm trying to make it a mix of these are the anecdotes, these are the things I've experienced to be in the world, and then I'm trying to back that up with research. And so it's always like I find there's always this like weird fine line between making sure that what you're saying is like correct and can be proven, but then there comes to like you just have to act in the world, and that's just a lot of psychology and subjective reality. And so for that, our anecdote matters. And so, and I don't remember how we originally started talking about this, but it was the idea that you have a lot of powerful anecdotes just on the way that you approach life and training and coaching and all these different things.
Yeah, what was we talking about? I forget what we were talking. Oh, it's because I had just came from hanging out with my buddy Keegan.
That's right.
Up in Utah, and we had really gotten onto the topic about a lot about like anecdotal research and anecdotal. And when we say anecdotal research, like what does that even mean, right? Like realistically, anecdotal is not necessarily true or reliable because it's based on personal accounts rather than facts or research. And that's the key difference right now, that people look at, well, the information he's putting out is all anecdotal. Well, what does anecdotal mean? Well, let's clarify this real quick. It's either, accounts that are rather than facts or research at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's personal experience.
It's personal experience. And I think that's where in the realm of like, myself and you, we were both getting ready. Like I'm going to school currently for sports psychology, and you're going back to school and doing all this stuff to get ready for what you want to do in your career, right? Because throughout this whole time period of what we've been doing in our profession, it's all literally been anecdotal research, experience, learning through trial and error, right? We've created these anecdotal experiences for us so we can rely and pass it on. And I think now we're at the point where a lot of people, and I think it could be a fad, it could be the change of the spectrum that people want to go ahead and walk across because they're like, oh, well, we need to go ahead and now have a scientific backing behind it compared to where 4 years ago where someone would say something and it automatically would stick, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, for people that are listening to this, if you're thinking about the people that you follow, it's like, you don't want to follow a charlatan, right? So you want there to be some kind of fact behind what they're saying. Otherwise, you follow somebody that could, lead you God knows where. But then at the same time, there's this idea that what holds up in a laboratory doesn't always hold up in life, and that's what I found. Like it's like that is a great principle, that is a good idea, that's a good habit, that's a good performance technique, whatever it is. But if I can't apply that to my life, then it means jack shit to me.
Yeah, it's funny you bring this up because I just had a conversation with my buddy Keegan. Actually, me and Keegan talk a lot, my buddy Kyle also. And Alex Vieta just put up a recent post on his IG story, actually. I don't know if you follow him, but he posted like, hey, ask me questions, I'll answer him. And one thing I love about Alex Vieta, and like I said, it's one of those things where he has been that founder of where he's created like that hybrid aspect. And I'm kind of in that realm of looking at apex athlete. I'm starting to finally develop the definition of what apex is compared to a hybrid athlete. And one thing that Alex really just talked about right now is people ask about nasal breathing, and he talked about nasal breathing gurus and all these other people who are claiming the fame of like how breathing can, and nothing against Brian McKenzie and Rob Wilson and everything they're doing, but a lot of it goes back to anecdotal research and experience from themselves. And at the same time, it also goes to research, but this research is stated almost 60, 70 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the claim that Alex Vieta brought out was saying is that this was taken from society who isn't who we are today. For instance, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we were actually 10% less obese than we are today, is what he was trying to get to. And he shows scientific research back behind it, right? Well, let's go ahead and take that research and let's go ahead and take someone like ourselves. We know that we can't nasal breathe for a 26-mile run. We know that, especially when unless we're trying to just pretty much walk the whole time. Mm-hmm. Then we will, right? It's the same idea when we go ahead and look at the athletes at the CrossFit Games where they were nasal breathing the whole time through because they were trying to conserve energy, mm-hmm. right? Well, conserving energy and managing energy at the end of the day isn't just through breathing. It's all these consolidated stressors together that are causing this reaction of them performing to happen. So, one thing ends up happening is yes, can we nasal breathe and exhale through the mouth? Yes, we can. But again, it all goes to anecdotal and actually research in the two there because of the fact that I can now say like, oh, I've actually tried to nasal breathe for 2 hours during a run and it fucking completely fucked me up. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that I'm not a good breather. Like I'm not a shitty breather. I've worked on my breathing very well. Like I can breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth and maintain a 120 heart rate for 60-minute run. I just did that today. Right. If you ask me to go to nasal breathing for 60 minutes, I've noticed too that my heart rate increases over time. Why? Because of CO2 buildup. Mm-hmm. I am not exhaling through my nose, or I don't have a wide enough gap or funnel through my nose to go ahead and exhale all that CO2. Yeah. Right? So that there is anecdotal because I am now seeing this by personal experience. Right?
And it's important to recognize that. So, like, I think two things that you just brought up that are important to think about is one is, what is your personal experience? Because if our biologies are so infinitely different, even though they're, we're all the same animal, we're all in the same human condition, but our intricacies of what makes our actual makeup so different is that means that we're going to respond differently to different stressors. And so even if there were, yards of research based on nasal breathing, it still might not work for you. Like that's super important to remember. Like it's, when you want to look at research with a really wide body of data, so that there's a better chance it's going to be applicable for you. When a lot of times people will do something, they'll have an N of 1 because they're the only one that did it, and then they just say, well, that's the way for everybody. And it's like, no, that's bullshit. So to a large degree, like what you're talking about is like a very personal experience. And then I would say on the nasal breathing thing in general, like, I use it and I've had really good, I feel like I've really increased efficiency by using it as a tool.
A tool.
Right. But when people ask me, I usually say, well, this is how I implemented it. And if I use it with my clients, I don't use it with all of them, but some of them, I say, this is why, this is how I use it. This is where it helped me in a race. At no point, and if they're like, hey, this sucks, or I don't like this, or I'm having this reaction, then it's like, then that's a tool we don't use. You know what I mean? And so you have to know, like, I think when you're hiring a coach or when you're following an influencer or somebody, it's like, are the things that they're saying, are they based in their own experience? And then, you have to weigh the fact that your experience just could be different because you're a different human.
Yeah, and it just comes to, again, like you talk about, it comes down to biological characteristics and psychological characteristics at the same time, because of the fact that, again, if you don't know how to breathe properly, right? And I like that we're using this because this is something that's really big out there right now. If you don't know how to breathe properly and all of a sudden you start focusing on nasal breathing, and this is something people can go look and research, and I have to give this credit. I can't take this credit. You have to give credit to Chris VB, from one of my coaches from Softly, who we worked together. He took a diving course, and when he took that free diving course, he broke down the lungs into 3 tiers. Right, tier 1 is being like the right first quarter of the heart of the lungs, and then the tier 2 was like the middle part of the lungs, and tier 3 was going to be like the deep end of the diaphragm, pretty much the bottom portion, right? And the problem that we see with that now is when we're shitty breathers, we're only accessing tier 1 when we breathe, right? So you got to think about that. All that CO2 buildup in tier 2 and tier 3 now cause problems not just biologically, but also psychologically and physiologically, right? We start seeing these problems happen. So it's like, why not just go ahead and reteach someone how to breathe first before just giving them this idea of like, hey, go and try and nasal breathe, because you're just causing more problems, right? And again, going back to looking in that realm, it's like, well, the goal here is to make you 1% better by adding a tool to your toolbox to go ahead and continue moving along this line of becoming this human that is the most optimal to your potential. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's kind of where we look at this now. Okay, cool. Let's go and start blending this anecdotal experience and blending it now with the research and being able to have some kind of back and be like, well, yeah, the research does say that, but from personal experiences, this is what has happened. Okay, now let's go a little further and take this from other anecdotal experiences from other athletes. This is what happened with them. So how can we look at a piece of paper at all times and be like, this is exactly what it is, and that's what we need to live by, when unfortunately, one, does that research paper go ahead and tell you what kind of people they have researched it on? What time period was it? Who are they? What's their lifestyle? Because again, everyone's biological, psychological and social graph, we can look at is completely different. Yours is different and mine is different.
Yeah. Right. And that's so that brings up a really good point. I don't want to get too wrapped around the axle with breathing specifically, because I think there's a lot of areas that we can apply the same philosophy to. But that's another way that I use nasal breathing. So like if you look at somebody like you, if I were to train somebody like you are a different population than a lot of people, because you have such a good understanding of your own breath mechanics, right? Of the way that you breathe. A lot of people don't. And so simply bringing awareness to their breathing is something that can be beneficial. But then the other thing that's really beneficial that you brought up there is the sort of way that physiology and psychology have a way of influencing each other. So if I put you on a treadmill and I increase the speed up a little bit, but I increase the incline up, and then I tell you to shut your mouth, we are now dealing with a psychological stressor, right? And so it's a good way to build it into people that are not quite used to it. And I'm always looking for ways to enhance the psychology of somebody just by programming a workout. And so that's just another factor, I think.
Yeah, and that kind of goes down to, again, like, well, for instance, you put me on a treadmill with a 50-pound pack on my back and you ask me to put it the highest incline and go for as long as possible, and then you grab someone who's never done what I've done and do the same thing, but their life growing up was put through the ringer. Now let's go and see what happens there, because that can make you question, like, well, what is their willpower like? And they've struggled in other ways. Can they now transfer that over to doing what they are, compared to someone who has been not working out for a couple of years or hasn't at all ever done something? You ask them to do it, they're going to quit right away. Mm-hmm. Right? It all just comes back hand in hand. And like, well, what is the environment that you grew up in for you to understand and handle that idea that we're talking about there, right? To put someone to test their psychological, toughness or, whatever it is. And that kind of goes into this idea, and people probably see me been posting about it now, is like, I've now gone to the point to where I look at conditioning completely different than what most people will look at conditioning as. Okay. Right? And we've talked about, I think I talked to you about this before, or did we not? Talk about like how I look at.
Let's get into it a little bit.
So, and this goes again into anecdotal and actually now research type of topic stuff with going to school, and learning about the differences in, and when I look at conditioning for psychological approaches, when I look at that, it's now looking at how well are you mentally able to handle this certain environment that you're going to be put in when you're tested at any given time, right? That is what I look at condition wise. And then we go ahead and look at fitness. Fitness now is, okay, cool, I'm increasing markers like increasing heart rate, decreasing resting heart rate, fixing, your HRV, make sure you're getting sleep better, make sure all these things in that realm that can be measured and tracked is the fitness that we're increasing. Because anybody can be fit, but if they're not conditioned to go ahead and transfer that fitness across, they're only going to hurt themselves, right? So let's go back to the whole idea of the treadmill thing that you talked about. Mm-hmm. If you put an athlete like me who is conditioned mentally and who is physically fit, I'll be able to handle it. You put someone who's next to me who now fails 5 minutes in it, but we know that they're physically fit there. They're not conditioned to handle that type of environment that they're put in that current time and moment.
Right.
and that has been something really big that I've gone into and really believe, like, hey, conditioning the mind is conditioning the mind for whatever environment and task they're going to be put in is going to be key. Because again, we look at it in MMA also, and we look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You can have some of the fittest dudes come in there and fight, but then all of a sudden they start falling apart towards the back end. Why? Because they are mentally not conditioned to be able to handle that kind of high stress environment, because through their training they didn't train properly for that to handle that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think as a coach too, like you're always looking for the way to put them in an environment that's going to expand them psychologically and physiologically, but it's not going to break them, right? So if you put them, if you take the undeconditioned person and you crank the speed up, crank the incline up, and tell them 45 minutes, like, and you're just like, all right, we'll force mental toughness, like that might not be the thing. So you have to like find that line of like what's going to push you to expand but not break you, and that's sort of what you're always toying with as a coach.
Yeah,
and as an athlete.
And as an athlete, right? Or is he like, screw a coach and athlete? How about a human being?
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, right? Like, you can go ahead and put anybody in a situation that if they're not conditioned to handle it, they're going to somewhat disappoint themselves in the outcome that comes from it, right? I didn't want to say fail or whatever else, because again, they might complete the task, but it might not be completed as well as they could have completed if they were conditioned in the way of handling that stressor and as a whole, right?
Yeah.
We can look at, go for it, sorry.
Well, no, I was going to say, then you sort of start running into the problem of, the human psyche largely works on momentum. And so if you, put somebody in a situation where use the word fail or just for whatever reason have a negative experience, they're going to start associating that thing with negative experiences, and it's a feedback loop that they're going to get stuck in, and so that's the same. And it's like, that's life in general, because that's how our psyche is set up. And so you want to put yourself in situations that expand growth but allow you to succeed so that you can continue to build the momentum in a positive way for yourself.
And this goes back to the same thing when we talked about learning how to manage energy, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're doing something for however long, all you're doing is managing your energy in arousal state, right? It's all we're realistically doing there. Because if our arousal was to be on the low end, are you going to be very motivated or be able to put any energy towards whatever specific task that's been given to you? No, right? Like, that's the truth. So if we can go ahead and manage energy in the proper way to handle that arousal state and be able to shift it towards being motivated to do something that we want to do. For example, a 2.5 hour run, we need to go out there and run and do all that stuff. That's what we're going to end up seeing. Sorry about that, dude. My dog's trying to.
No, it's all good. I'm laughing because as you're saying that, I'm thinking like, we're thinking about the context of life. It's like, consider when you are like meeting somebody or considering getting in a relationship with somebody. If you're not attracted to them, how much effort are you willing to put in, right? And so that's how people end up in these lukewarm relationships where they have people that are sort of on the back burner and they're like, well, fucking see, like, and if nothing's going on, you'll call them and you'll get the "you up" text. Like, that's how all that stuff happens, because you like, at the your arousal was low in the very first place.
Yeah.
So you were never willing to put in the amount of energy that like a good relationship would require, like, to foster. And so same thing when you put that energy into anything. Like, if your arousal is low, you're just not going to be willing to, put the effort required in. And to that, I would say, if you're in any situation in life where the energy is not there and you're not willing to put it in, the arousal's not there and you're not willing to put the energy in, then fucking don't do it.
Yeah, and it comes down to like, well, what are the factors that drive those kind of behaviors, right? Like, does it satisfy our needs? What is the pleasure of what we're doing in that realm, right? Like, what are those factors in that realm to make us be motivated to continue moving forward with something is the big thing there, I really believe. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so how does somebody go about sort of weighing those factors then when they're looking at what, where they should put their energy in life? Like, how do they set that value structure up?
And again, this goes back to like our own anecdotal experiences, right? Like, I mean, we all have our own story. We have all our own background and stress and everything else like that. And, this is all just going to be anecdotal for me. One thing that I've realized and come to find out is that I need to have some kind of I need to have a goal with what I'm doing, no matter what it is.
Yeah, like an aim, like something to
like an aim, right? Like that's realistically what it is. It's a goal that I'm working towards. It can be in training, it can be in life, it can be in work, it can be in relationship. I need some kind of goal to work towards.
Yeah.
And as long as I have a goal that I'm working towards, I'm going to go ahead and be able to have some type of arousal state and motivation and emotion to continue moving forward, which are going to drive those factors of behavior that are going to lead me to hopefully succeeding.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right? So that's kind of one of those things where we look at it as, so, I mean, going back to the anecdotal aspect, like when we go ahead and bring it full circle, if we wanted to think about that, you know, anecdotally, like it's all going to come from personal experiences. We can read all the books that we want and we can have all that backing. It's just adding to whenever we get into a certain experience or certain exposure, then we're going to be able to handle it because we have some type of information and behind us to aid in that experience to actually make it more fulfilling for us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's such a personal thing when you think about having an aim and think about what was going to make it fulfilling. And that's like one of the problems I think when people are like looking for bigger meanings behind things. Like they want to, like, what is the meaning of all this? What's the meaning of life? It's like, well, that's going to be a very personal thing, and it's going to depend. It's going to evolve based on how you evolve in your life. It's like that. Whatever you intrinsically value is where you're going to find your meaning. And so, you know, to your point, that is a very anecdotal thing because it's a very personal thing. But I'm the same way. I think humans in general, the way that our value structures are set up, we need something to aim at in order to deal with all of the bullshit that's going to get in our way to get somewhere. Because, you know, anywhere you want to get in life, like any goal you want, whether it's running 100 miles or whatever, if you're not drawn to that goal, you're not going to deal with the bullshit that comes up in the middle that want to get over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's 100%. And we keep talking about needs, but like, what is that? One thing that I feel like we miss a lot of the times is going to be that driver to lead to that behavior, right? So for example, if the need is oxygen, our drive is going to be feeling like we're suffocating, which now our behavior is going to be breathing. Mm-hmm. You know, if our need is food, what's our drive? You know, hunger, I need to eat. The behavior is going to be eating, right? Like the drive's like, if I don't eat, I might die. Water, you know, the same thing. If I don't have water, I end up becoming thirsty and dehydrated, which now leads to me drinking water because I don't want to die. That's the drive, right? I think that's a lot of people miss that. Everyone's like, well, I need this. I just don't know where to do it. It's like, well, what's the drive? What's the drive there for us to end up having that? You know, we can go back to the whole, and again, the show's about anecdotal. That's what we're talking about here, right? And right now, and a lot of people might, like, I just jumped onto the Whoop train, you know, Whoop about HRV. And if you remember 2 years ago, I was really big into HRV and learning about it, and I took some courses with Elite HRV and Bioforce HRV with Joel Jameson, and you know, did a good year of studying with it, and now I haven't touched it in about 2 years and finally back on it. And it's crazy is because of all the anecdotal experience from testing it to now living it and learning more about the human body and the psyche behind it. I look at the Whoop now as one of the most powerful tools that you can actually help an athlete benefit of how to manage intensity and how convenient it is to just go ahead and this. But again, being able to sit there and explain to the athlete, this is a tool. This is not something that's going to go ahead and be the end all be all, and that you have to still trust your intuition and understand that this is what's going to drive you at the end of the day, right? Not some numbers on a screen, not whatever else, but what's really going to drive you is the need for is the need that you're trying to fulfill.
Yeah.
And you know, so like for instance, like my need to be on Whoop. Well, my need to be on Whoop is to learn more about the Whoop, right? Like my drive for that is one, it lets me become a little more educated on the Whoop as the company with SoftFeed is talking and using it more with the athletes that are following our programming. Well, cool. The other drive of that also is me seeing these athletes' scores and stuff that are following it and being able to get a little bit more insight and seeing how this is utilized. And realistically, at the end of the day, it's just coming down to tracking heart rate. And how many times your heart rate is sustained at a higher level, that's realistically what it's taking from there, and it's categorizing and considering it strain, right? Well, my behavior towards that is learning all this stuff even more. So my behavior is training and following it and learning more about it. And I think a lot of people get confused with yeah, I need to do something, but then they just don't want to create that experience to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that is such a great point. Like you need to, I think this is something that people really need to think about, like when they're thinking about goal setting, like you need to elevate that thing to its most important level, right? So I noticed this in my own life. Like I was a lukewarm entrepreneur until I needed to make money, like until I needed it to be my lifestyle and I didn't have any other paycheck, right? Then the need for that grew so much that it put my back against the wall and forced me to do the things that I had to do. And so you have to, in some way, figure out a way to take your goals and elevate them to a point where the need for that does create drive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is you just literally trying to manage your optimal arousal and performance state at the end of the day. And we can use performance as a physical performance, or it can be a mental performance, right? But at the end of the day, though, is if you can understand that, hey, that, you know, if something is needed, right, we must create some kind of drive that creates this arousal to go ahead and encourage you to go ahead and reduce that drive, right? So it fulfills that need. And that's exactly what you're doing there. You knew while you're in the military, you were okay to be this lukewarm fucking entrepreneur because you were getting a paycheck and it was covering your bills and you were doing all this stuff and you were doing what you loved and you have to worry about nothing.
Right.
All of a sudden now you get out of the military and all of a sudden now your need is to make a living. Well, all you know how to do is be an entrepreneur. So your drive to make a living is such a priority that it now drives and creates an arousal and performance for you, which you are doing now, to go ahead and put out, you know, this effort to go ahead and reduce this drive to fulfill this need.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing, right? And like, to make it in simple terms, like, you know, if you're feeling tired or bored, you might choose to go hang out with your friends, right? Like that might be something to help not make you feel tired or bored. Or if you're bored, then you go hang out with somebody so you're not bored, or go train or go climb or go do something fun. So it changes that. So you now get reduce that drive at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think to a large part, we have to be able to like architect our own experiences in life. So like you have to figure out ways to add value to things that might not hold a lot of value. Like especially when it comes to like physical endeavors, like this is why it's important sometimes to put your goals out there, right? To tell the world, like this is why when I decided to do that 240-mile run, I started putting it all over social media because I just elevated my need to do that thing by 100-fold, right? Because there was no way I was going to look like a bitch and say I was going to do this thing and then not do it, right? Like that for me was a big way to elevate the need. And so that's why I think you should, when you set these goals and these ideas for yourself and you want to start a new business, you have this other aspect in life that you want to pursue. That is one of the driving forces behind sharing it with people, like sharing your dreams with people, because it's an accountability, right? It forces that need for accountability to be higher. So
this is a question for you. Have you reached a place of lack of motivation due to how hard you came out in trying to reduce this drive of, you know, making a living?
What do you mean? Can you explain it a little bit?
So, for example, like let's say like you're like, all right, I need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Boom. You start focusing on it, all of a sudden you notice that you're not too motivated to continue doing something, or it's causing a little bit more stress or more anxiety behind it due to the emphasis of making it a priority.
Oh, right. Yeah, so I try to get, I think that not enough people focus their efforts in what they really want. So what I mean by that is like, so if you have an idea, let's say that we'll use entrepreneur as an example because it's kind of what we're talking about. If you have an idea for something, like you want to be an entrepreneur, you should start with what you want to do, like in the world, because that's where you're going to find your unique genius and where you're going to find intrinsic motivation to keep working on that thing. The part of the equation that I always got wrong is I tried to think about the end. I didn't work from the inside out on like, what do I value? What do I want my lifestyle to look like? What do I want to actually be working on with my time? And so because I didn't start there, because I started on the outside and I was like, I just want a business and I just want to make money and I want all these other sort of outside material metrics. Because I started there, once I started doing the work to get there, I realized, I would lose motivation. I would be miserable doing the work. And I like found myself with, even if I was having success, it was like I would resent the day. And a lot of people do that. Like a lot of people, like they want to be online coaches, so then they pick up clients and then they end up resenting them because of all the work it's actually requiring. And so I think you got to throw that model out, to be completely honest, because that for years for me was causing me to do work that I resented and didn't like, and would lose motivation in the middle of. Since I rewound and I just started to be very clear on what do I want my lifestyle to look like? What do I want my day-to-day task to be? What do I, all of these things. And then you can take whatever you want to do in the world, start a business, and fit it into that. Like, that's one of the big things I'm doing with the Clarity Academy is I'm teaching people how to start very, very intrinsic, like very close to what they want their life to look like and what they want. And then you can fit other things into that, because then you ensure you're always working on things that you actually want, not the other way around.
So on top of that, what is on a scale, like, so the next point that I like to bring to that, DJ, because I feel this is something a lot of people do a lot of. They do something that that's not pleasurable for them. They're doing something that doesn't make them happy. They're doing something that doesn't whatever else, right? And one thing that I've learned, recently, and this is, again, we could talk about the endurance blues talk too about all this stuff, right? Was that, the idea of doing something wasn't very pleasurable for me. For instance, like going out and doing a long run for a couple weeks or even longer than that wasn't pleasurable for me. So there was a feedback loop, or you can say a rewind behind that. So that ended up causing my motivation arousal, meter to go ahead and just go completely down the drain, right? Like there was no need for me to go out and reduce that drive of needing to run, because I had no specific goals set up anymore. I had just completed a big goal and all these other things. And so I realized was, one of the biggest factors in here is how, if it's pleasurable, right? And that's one thing I've learned now, this is the first week probably, that another big week that I've actually noticed as well is everything's fun again. It's starting to be fun again.
Yeah.
It's starting to be pleasurable to me in a sense that, it feels good and I want to do it again. And especially now with tracking my HRV again and following with the Whoop and learning the behinds of in and outs of how it works, because I learned with the Elite HRV and Bioforce HRV, and seeing what helps with that and seeing how well that helps me fulfill the need of learning more about this tool. And then now, well, that's cool. Now that's also helped me create a drive to go ahead and complete, an A race that I'm looking towards this coming year in 2019 and trying to make it better. There's so many, every single thing inside my life now has some kind of pleasure in it to go ahead and keep everything balanced across the board. And I think a lot of people miss that as well. And again, this goes back to the anecdotal aspect. Like I wouldn't be able to experience that or know that if it wasn't for me actually going through some kind of experience that caused this. And now it's like, wow, okay, cool. All right, cool. That makes sense now. I don't want to feel that way. I want to go ahead and make sure it feels good so I can do it again.
Yeah. And I think part of that, just as I'm listening to you talk about and thinking about my own life, is that there's a rhythm to life and you sort of have to accept it. Like you can't, if you're forcing it when it's not there, you're going to be miserable and it's not going to work anyway. So I've really focused on trying to lean into how I'm feeling so that I can accept that rhythm, because that was one of the things I did a Q&A after the 247 mile run that I did, and a lot of people were like, what's next, and I'm like, no, I've been through this. I know what's next. I'm gonna go into these post-race blues, and I'm not gonna want to do shit. I'm not gonna want to feel motivated to run. My adrenals are gonna be fatigued, really just wrecked. And so that's why I decided right after that run, I'm starting going into this book and the business stuff, because I can push an intellectual frontier. I won't feel like I'll run as I feel like it, and that'll be whatever. And so that's what I've done the last few months. I've just understood that rhythm of how this thing goes. And then, it was just a couple days ago that I did another race. I ran a 30K out here, and it was after I finished it, I was like, okay, I'm ready to train. I'm ready to get, but I could have forced it for the last couple months, but the results wouldn't have been different. I just would have been a little bit more miserable.
Well, yeah, and this comes down to your self-determination and your own precipitation of yourself, right? You knew coming out of this 247 mile race or 260 mile race, however you want to go ahead and talk about it, that you knew that you were not going to have no determination to go out and run again.
Wait, did I say 260?
You said 247. I said 260.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 247. But you knew that you had no self-determination to go out and run if you wanted to. You knew that the next few, there was not going to be there. So you had to figure out where to put self-determination somewhere else in your life. And that was the need to write a book and get this new business started, because you're now out. Why? Because that drives the need to make you have a living so that you can handle life. Like, that's just what it comes down to. So we always need to understand that we need to be moving at all times this around to make sure that we are leading in the realm of being in a good place of balance and, you know, creating the right goals for us at the end of the day. And I hate talking, like, we talk about goals all the time, and that's just because we're dudes who like talking about it. That's just the truth, right? And I feel like sometimes our podcast, sometimes similar, we talk about some of these things, but I think as we continue growing and creating our own anecdotal experiences, we're able to bring a little bit more in depth to it. You know, now we're talking a little bit about now like self-determination, and we're talking about, you know, conditioning of the mind and all these different things. And at the end of the day though, dude, it's like, it's because we're able to go out there and be more aware of it. And that's one key word you said earlier, like aware, when we're talking about the breathing aspect. We're just becoming more aware. And I think everyone now is becoming aware of this, and we see it, right? Everyone's a mind coach. Everyone's a performance coach. Everyone's doing this. Everyone's doing that. And I took a cut back on Instagram for a while and back on it more now. But because I kind of felt like, you know, what can we bring? What is everyone trying to bring to the table right now, right? Is everyone just learning? Or are they just seeing other people do their own things? So they're creating this own, you know, drive because they want to be like everyone else to post, you know. And I wanted to make sure that like what I'm doing out in my real life, again, because I look at that social media stuff as, you know, it's not real life. I look at this as real life, like that everything that I'm doing is my own self-determination and my own, you know, motivation to get things done. Right? Like that's a lot of what it comes down to. And I think that's where we've learned that pretty well over the time periods. And I think people are starting to experience it now. It's just hard to see if it's really, really genuine coming from people on Instagram or Facebook or whatever else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. So part of me is wondering as I'm listening, like if it's possible for people to learn this without going through it. So I know for me, for example, like I've got to fuck it up 100 ways until I realize like the right way. So, you know, and when I think about accepting this rhythm and thing and like what we're talking about now, the only reason that I know that about myself is because I ran a 200 the year before, and I fucking forced myself to run for 3 months after that, and I was so miserable, and it took me such a long time to get back into a place where I wanted to set a goal and set an aim. And so, you know, I'm curious about your opinion on that. Like, do you think it's something you can learn, or do you think a lot of this is just you got to go through the school of life and learn it that way?
You can learn it because everyone is going through the school of life right now. It's just you being most aware of these situations, of these ebbs and flows of life that we're talking about, right? Because everyone should have some kind of goal they're working towards. Let's say we'll use a business person, for example. If they have this big PowerPoint presentation, they got to go ahead and give to their higher ups in 4 weeks, and their goal is just that. Well, that's their goal to work on, right? Once they get it, they have everything behind it, all the behaviors to satisfy that need. They have the active, you know, the direct and sustained. They're looking at their drive and their arousal, saying, is this pleasurable for me right now while I'm working this? Because what am I going to get on the back end? All of a sudden we finish it. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, okay, cool. I demonstrated, like, it came out the way I wanted it to be, everything else. Now what's next? That's always the question. What is next? Well, how about we should have had that planned beforehand, is what I'm starting to realize.
Yeah, 100%.
Is what I started to realize. And the way I learned that was going through my times of trying to compete at a high level at CrossFit, trying to compete at a high level of weightlifting, and now enjoying running and swimming and biking and climbing and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and strength training, is that I can do all these things now, but I just always have to be a step ahead of what it is, right? For example, like, I know that I want to complete either, you know, there's a couple big races next year coming up. We talked about that, like Bigfoot 200, it's a goal of mine. Well, when I finish that, what's next after that? Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut back on focusing on being an athlete as much and actually focus on now creating more. And maybe, you know, I've talked about wanting to write a book for the longest time. Maybe now talk about developing, are you an apex athlete, you know, are you an apex, you know, and then the way I look at that is like, you're a jack of all trades, master of none. Mm-hmm. That's truth. That's what I want to be. I want to be able to be like, you can walk out anywhere you go, right? And we're like, what we're doing here is going to transfer over to life. For example, there was a there was a video yesterday on Facebook I saw about a guy who was going parasailing, and he didn't get hooked in properly with his glider, his driver, or whatever you want. Fucking that all up. Sorry, guys. Well, he didn't clip it in properly, so when they took off, he came off and was holding on for like literally to the guy's like rig and the parasailing glide like handle for like 4 minutes, dude, until he finally hit the ground, until they finally landed. Right. And right there, and I thought in my head is like, man, that dude must be training a lot of grip to be able to have that happen. Like, that's automatically what came into my head.
Maybe, or a survival mechanism.
But it was a survival mechanism, right? Yeah, his survival mechanism kicked in, right? But the thing is, though, is imagining, though, training that kind of, like, training just grip in the gym would transfer over to be him being able to handle that, because he ended up breaking part of his wrist and broke a couple, like, part of his leg just from holding on so long, and then when he hit the ground.
Oh, shit.
Right? Well, so it's like one of those things, well, that's straight survival. At the same time, it's like, well, we can't really train for survival, but we can train the body to be as strong as it can to handle any kind of survival situations that we need to be in.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of the way I look at that. So, to go back to answer your question, because that was like a tangent that I went off on there with. But go back to answer your question, yes. Yes, do I believe that this can be learned? It can be, because everyone experiences in different ways. Everyone's life and their perception in what is hard is completely different than yours and mine. And that's one thing I've realized is like, yeah, it's like, okay, cool. Like, you might have gone through a hard, rough past 2 weeks, but it's only temporary. And guess what? That's going to happen again. But if you can be aware of what just happened, you can set yourself up to be successful when it does come around again, to where you don't have this negative feedback and you actually have a positive feedback on the back end.
Yeah.
Just like you just had. Right? You knew you ran a 200-mile race last year. You tried to get back into running again. You got back out there. You ran 247 miles. You knew right away that the next 2 months or whatever else was not going to be very much running. You knew that I'm going to go ahead and let my body rest, but I'm going to go ahead and change direction and focus somewhere else. Now, is that because of the change in environment that you just went through from not being in the military to being where you're at now? Probably, because that was another signal of like, oh, I need to create some kind of support and income and living for myself.
Oh yeah, right? I mean, of course it was all, factored together. Like, you can't just, I'm going to go train to run now without any plan of how you're going to like support yourself. Like, you have to think about your life all interchangeably, but to your original point, I agree completely. Like, you have to have or you don't have to, but to be next step ahead, to have your next step planned is such a better idea, because then it's seamless. Like, this time I didn't have all this frustration of trying to make myself run and trying to make myself work out and do all these things. It was like, no, I'm gonna move as I feel like it will enhance my health and I feel like it. And other than that, like, this is a period in my life where I'm gonna push this intellectual frontier and I'm gonna work on my book and courses and all that. And so, to a large degree, I think you're right. You have to have it planned ahead, because if you wait until you're in chaos to figure it out, you're fucked. That's one thing I figured out. Like, 10 times out of 10, if you wait to start building the ark once it's already raining, you're fucked.
I mean, it's true, dude. It's 100% true. And like, everyone listening to the show, because we, like, our listeners, they probably all experienced that. They're like, I want you guys to think back in a time period of when you were in chaos and you try to figure out what to do from there. Right. And then think about a time when you weren't in chaos and you're like, I want to make this move in my life, and how seamlessly the transition was compared to when it wasn't. Because I've been in both areas. I've been in both spots. Right. Transitioning out of the military, like, I was able to make a good transition from, and when I say good transition, I knew what I wanted to get into. Money-wise, no, but I knew where I wanted to go. So it was a smooth transition for me. Now, that's just kind of one of those things in it, right? The same thing with, I've done it before, to where I've competed in a national weightlifting meet and I decided to get back to training right away, and I saw the negative effects of it, right? Because that can't be used as chaos, but I can use, it's hard to, like, I have so many chaos. Like, how do you cope when someone passes away, right? That's during chaos. You probably should have had coping mechanisms prior to that to be ready for it.
Yeah, or a worldview that allowed you to process it correctly.
Yeah. It's just, so yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think I agree. You have to try to sort of architect your experience to a certain degree, to the level that you can. Like, you can't plan for everything. You can't. But the more, and that goes into like sort of, the realm that you're getting into with this idea behind the apex athlete is that like you want to plan for as many contingencies as possible and be as prepared as possible, especially when if you're not a pro athlete, the idea of specialization and focusing outside of just doing it because you like it it's not a good strategy for life in general. Like, it's what we started this show talking about months ago. It's like if you're the CrossFitter that wins a local throwdown and you don't have a fucking friend in the stands, like maybe you're putting too much attention in one place. And so I think the more well-rounded and prepared you can be as a human being before you go into any one situation, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, that's huge, man. And that goes into the same idea. Like, we can go ahead and like use non-specific training to sport-specific training, and we can transfer that over to non-life specific goals and, life-specific goals, right? Like, having non-specific life goals is I believe, can help with catering towards the specific life goals that you're working towards, right? It creates experience, like learning how to fix a toilet. Like, I can use that now when I'm working to get my own house. I can change out my own toilet and not spend that kind of money. And I know that's kind of like a broad aspect, but that's as simple as I kind of look at that realm there. I've kind of gone really into the aspect of, non-specific type of, exposures is going to create more awareness and better experiences when it comes to more specific types of events in our life.
Right. And so you want, and I think, the more adaptable and planned you've been, for all of those different contingencies, I think the easier this human experience is going to be. It's kind of that, have you ever heard the Jason Kotick quote, what a human should be able to do?
No, I never have.
I love this quote. So a human should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specializing is for insects.
That's fucking amazing, bro.
Right?
That's so powerful. That's dope, dude.
Yeah,
you gotta
send me that,
man.
I will. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time because I really I resonate with that. I read it and I'm like, yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, be useful. Like, make yourself fucking useful in all of these different adverse situations that you're going to get faced with, and then you get to be the rock for people when shit goes wrong. Like, you get to be the guy that's like, I already built the ark, fam, we're good. You know what I mean? Like, just come this way.
Well, exactly, right? And if you're that kind of person, how does it make you feel? It makes you feel really good that you're able to provide and support for someone, because, again, at the end of the day, us human beings are meant to help with supporting each other, right? Mm-hmm. We're supposed to take care of ourselves, but we're also, for some reason, we have this tick in our brain that makes us want to provide support for others, and people can say no, but look at us how we're as a mother and as a father and a mother, supporting for someone else so that they can have a life and live is huge, mm-hmm. right? So the whole quote that you just went down with, that's something that I would love to go and start marking things off that list and be like, well, I need to get better at that. I need to get better at that. I need to get better at that.
Yeah, it's great, right? I think the inconvenient truth of that, though, is that, one, it takes a really great deal of awareness, self-awareness, to know where you're strong and where you're not, and to put time into where you're not. And that means you got to stop jerking off all day. You got to do something with yourself, and that's inconvenient because if you look at all of the sort of demands of life, if you really want to get good at all these things and be somebody that's successful in all of these arenas, you got shit to do. There are things you need to learn. You got to level up. You got to grow. You got to set your aim somewhere higher so that you can get through, the bullshit of the day.
Yeah, no, that's true, man. Is always trying to learn it. For instance, I was, I actually want to buy a piano. I want to learn how to play piano.
Yeah, you should.
That sounds fucking sweet.
I'm low key taking violin lessons in January, buddy. Don't even worry about it.
Bro, I played viola and string bass in middle school in the orchestra, bro.
Dude, the fucking sideshow the power couple orchestra coming up next, fam.
Yeah, little back history on me. I played string bass when I was in the orchestra, and I played the viola. Never touched the violin or the cello. So I have a big classical music in my background. Like today's 60-minute run, I just had piano music playing in the background.
Nice one. Yeah, I played piano in high school.
See? Yeah, dude, look at that. Yeah, and then I played bass for a couple of hardcore bands and pop punk bands when I was a kid, and then yeah.
You know what's funny about that is I was reading this book on this really big study done on high performers, and one of the things that they brought up that I thought was really interesting, all these people that are sort of high performers in life, one of the qualities that they all shared was that they are always spending time in their day to learn something new. And it's not something related to the task that they're high performers in. So a lot of it was like singing lessons or, public speaking or whatever it was. But it's like just this idea that you're willing to be an amateur and engage in the process and the struggle and learn something new. It forces, I think, all this neuroplasticity. It forces your mind to expand and to try to grapple with new concepts. And then that just makes you better in any other arena.
Oh, 100%, dude. That's the same thing. Like I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, dude. Yeah. Like I got in there and it was nice to walk in and just listen to, the instructor just talk and teach and see how they teach and how they flow. It was just very, very intriguing and very interesting to me. And it was cool, right? And the next thing is like, all right, cool. Like, that's fun. But again, being creative and trying to be an amateur in a lot of things, especially in this lifetime, is hard, dude. And again, we're so stuck in the fitness realm because that's where we kind of come from. It's nice to go ahead and branch out into places where it's not, and it's such a change of pace, right? It just balances everything out, and it goes back to the idea of being able to do everything and not be a specialist at the end of the day. Right, like let me ask you this question and see what you think behind it, because I had this conversation with one of my buddies, with Kyle and Keegan. Also, want to see what you think. I go, what was the question I asked? Sorry, there's that. Let me see. I can't find it right now, but it was like, do you think that we are starting to change from being so sport specific to non-sport specific over time? So are we changing to become non-specialists now compared to previously years in the fitness realm? That was the question.
We as in human beings?
Yes. Like the people in the fitness industry now, is it starting to now develop a non-specific type of training mindset compared to being so specific because, CrossFit came out and did that?
Yeah, so I think obviously that is made clear by the advent of CrossFit. It got so big and everyone all of a sudden adopted this idea that they're training for life, right? The sport of life. And so to a certain degree, yes, we have that. But what's really weird is if you look at the whole storyline of CrossFit, functional fitness, and this idea that you're training to be good at everything, it has now become a focused sport. And I think that they're trying to change that in the CrossFit Games. They're trying to what are new things we could do? Well, how could we, whatever it is, how could we throw something at people they always try to do this in the games. But at the end of the day, to a CrossFitter, to be a good CrossFitter now, there's 10 things you got to be good at, but it's a sport itself. You got to be good with the barbell movements. You got to be good with work capacity. And so it's no longer as much this randomized, let me be good at everything thing that it used to be. So that's interesting. I don't know, but that's what it seems like.
Yeah. And the question I did ask was, can we say that the shift is being made from being so sport specific to more non-specific in training is the question I actually asked.
Yeah. I mean,
which
to
you
me,
just
it seems
answered
the shift was made, and then it seems like we've sort of gotten to the point where not specializing has become the specialization, and I don't really know where that goes from there.
Exactly, right? And that's at the end of the day. So me and Keegan and Sam talking, and it just came down to the idea of just at the end of the day, it's just the goal that we need to work towards, and that's when we become specialized in that realm. So if the goal is to go ahead and learn how to play piano, okay, cool. I'm going to spend some 30 minutes a day playing piano. When I'm playing 30 minutes a day playing piano, that's my specializing right now at that. And then when I have to go climb for 30 minutes or 45 or 60 minutes, I'm specializing in climbing, and my focus and goal is just that for that time period, right? And then all of a sudden later on that afternoon, it's oh, now I'm hanging out with my kids, and that is my goal, is to go ahead and specialize in being the best father possible. And then when I go ahead and put this all on paper, this all blends in together. Why? Because I was able to go ahead and put awareness and mindfulness into each task that I was doing successfully, and know that I didn't feel like I lost something doing it, compared to a lot of people who sometimes do feel that way from specializing too much in something.
Yeah, and it depends if you get really attached to the metric, the what success looks like in that sport, and then you attach your identity and who you are to that thing, then yeah, you're going to be afraid to be an amateur again and do these other things. But, I think about the fact that when I finished this 247-mile run, it was only 5 years prior that I was pulling a bus in my hometown in a strongman competition, and then it was only 3 years prior to that I was training for CrossFit Regionals. And I don't care, if I think about all of that, I don't care that I didn't get to regionals and I didn't win. I haven't won a 200, and I've had some marginally success in there. I've podiumed in a few different areas and different things, but for the most part, my identity and who I am is not attached to this idea that I'm going to achieve this metric in this sport and that's going to fulfill my life. It's no, it's a process of constantly learning more about who I am and putting myself in different situations and seeing how I adapt. And so for me, that is the metric. That's the thing. And so, I don't know where that goes, but I think if people that are listening to this think back on their life, it's are you really getting pulled into this idea that you're going to be validated by some metric? And is that screwing the rest of your life because you're afraid to be an amateur in these other areas? Because you just might find that you do something else and you love it,
Yeah. And that's actually the truth.
Yeah, if you'd have told me when I was competing in strongman that I would have loved running for 200 fucking miles, that's ridiculous. I would have been no, absolutely not. But I'm at a point now where I couldn't imagine doing something else. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. That is it right there, right? We're always evolving. That is at the end of the day. We're always evolving, and I think a lot of people, don't do that.
No, to evolve is human. That's what we do. It's what we've been doing since the beginning. So why the fuck are you so stagnant?
Yeah.
That's
no, that's 100%.
Yourself,
I don't know, man. I just feel I feel like a lot of it comes down to learning. People are afraid to learn because it takes so much time to do so. And, it comes down to associating learning, right? How do we associate learning, right? It requires how to understand two or more pieces of information. That's literally what it is, right? I want to be able to learn how to play piano. Well, that means I have to learn how to get my fingers to make a note, do this, to now make a sound. Mm-hmm. That sounds good, or it doesn't have to sound good. It could be whatever I want it to be. But understand that that's a learning process. That's something that I'm learning. I'm associating learning with my goal to continue making me evolve at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say in piano, the two moves are associating associating the recognition of a symbol on paper to the movement on your hands. I don't know. I got wrapped up in that, but yeah, I completely agree. it's so intrinsic to the human experience to grow and learn and evolve, and to put yourself in situations that are gonna continually force that upon you. Man, that's a good thing for life.
Yeah, definitely, dude. But I mean, at the end of the day, though, dude, it's just one of those things, man. All this ends up becoming our own anecdotal experiences that we are creating. We can read all the research papers, we can go ahead and study all the books and take all the tests and get all the certifications. But if we're not applying this to our own life and creating these own anecdotal experiences, then what are we really doing, right? And realistically, most research papers were what before they became research papers?
What, experiments?
Yeah, they were all personal experiences. Yeah. That's all they really were. Right? Somebody was like, well, I want to go ahead and test this. Let me go ahead and get all these other people and take their personal experiences and now create this research paper that has now been peer-reviewed by multiple people. And we got the hominis dominus. Now it's a research paper. Now it's certified science.
Right. Yeah. And life's an arena. So at the end of the day, it's all this whole thing. It's just a forum for action. It's a place for you to go out and act in the world and do the things that you want to do. And so you should look at it that way, and it's easy for us to get so upfront to our lives that we're living in a way that's I have to pay the bills and I have to go to do this responsibility and I have to do this thing. It's just sit back and realize you just have an opportunity here. You can make it what you want. You can do what you want with it. You can, but at the end of the day, your life's not going to be lived through a book or a screen or anything else. It's an arena. It's a forum for action. And so you have to go out and create your own anecdotes if you want this life to be yours.
Yeah, and that's where it's one of those things where, when we go back to looking at gurus for things, I try and look back as like, well, how much experience do they have in that realm of that, right? How much experience do you have in that topic of guru-ness that you're creating, that you're saying that you haven't, right? Like, have you experienced it really? Have you done it all? Or are you just doing it on a lower level? Have you experienced it at a high level of this? Those kinds of things. And again, I'm just saying gurus in general when we talk about people who come out with these new fads in nutrition, right? I know Brooke, our registered dietitian with Softly, she'd be laughing right now because she'd be like, it's true. She could get her on another thing. And then we go ahead and look at the fitness realm, right? Like we go ahead and look at this whole, the BFR right now, the blood flow restriction stuff going on right now, right? Everyone's like, look at all the scientific research and all this going on, and people are really pushing it. But it's like, the only reason why people are pushing is because they're trying it out by themselves from the information they've read. Now they're creating their own experiences. And I'm pretty sure some people like it, some people don't.
Yeah.
Right. But at the end of the day, though, it's like, at least you're figuring it out. Right. And it's just, again, at the end of the day, create your own experiences that end up becoming your own anecdotes that you can now throw into the mix of your own worldview.
Yeah. And to probably wrap it up into like, say, one more thing on that, just what you're talking about now. It's a lot of people in the world today they're espousing things that they don't know about because they've never put themselves in the situation. And that's the problem with going off research or science alone without any kind of anecdotal experience, because I see it a lot. Like, to your original point when we started this thing was about how many people are mindset coaches and performance coaches. And I see the things that they post, and I just think, like, have you been in that fucking situation? Like, where your back is really against the wall and you have nowhere to put the fucking pain? Like, have you been there? Because if you've been there, you'd realize the advice that you're giving out right now is shit. And so I think that, you really have to rely on your own anecdote, your own perception of an experience to craft good advice for somebody else. And a lot of us just aren't doing that.
It's funny, man, you bring this up. I had a friend reach out and asked about running a 50 miler. And I was like, yeah, man, I was like, you can do it in 9 weeks, 8 weeks. Just know it's going to be painful.
It's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt. But he was like, well, how was it for you? And I was like, I can sit here and tell you all day about my own experience. I was like, but I'm not going to go ahead and do that to you, because then that can cause some kind of negative effect for you in your race. Yeah. Right? Be like, oh, at mile 33 is when my legs started hurting. All of a sudden now he's mile 33, he started hurting. Like, that doesn't need to happen, right? Like, hey, like, just understand that you need to train your ass off and prepare yourself mentally for the times when you're gonna be kicked in the dick or kicked in the face or punched in the face, however you want to talk about, and get ready to go after it, right? And how you react from there. You're going to be able to create that experience and have that own experience. I can't tell you how to experience it. Yeah. And I think a lot of people nowadays are looking out for that. Like, hey, what is that experience in that realm of that? It's like, well, I can sit here and tell you, but you need to go experience yourself.
Right.
That's it. But yeah. And to answer your question, dude, or not even answer your question, but to go off of the whole, like, what is life like, dude? I don't know who said this, and I got to look up the guy, but maybe no one did say it. I don't know. I'm just guessing if it had to be said already. Life is like chess game, right? You always got to be a step ahead.
Yeah.
You're always trying to work to have checkmate. But I believe that your checkmate is when you are no longer around, I believe. I think you're always working. I don't know, man. I'm trying to think of these thoughts here together, but like, I look at life like chess and always trying to stay a step ahead of someone else or of like your own life.
Yeah, no, I'll buy that. I'll buy that all day. I think you definitely do. You have to be sort of, very self-aware and thinking about how different situations have affected you in the past, and then use that to plan for the future. And then at the end of the day, just understand, like, it's all like, it keeps coming back to this, but it's all an experience. Like, whether it goes right or it goes wrong or it gets frustrated, like, you are not, people, they get attached to things. Like, I'm putting out a morning coffee on this next week, but it's like, they're like, I'm angry. No, I'm Rick. I'm just experiencing anger. Like let it go, man. You're just going through your life figuring it out, And so I think to a large degree we have to just be in the process and be more easy with ourselves, because that's when you really start to enjoy the whole thing.
Yeah, bro. I hope I didn't take your saying for your next week morning coffee.
No, it's perfect. Love it.
Oh, man. It's been good, man. I'm happy we came back on the show, dude. It's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while. How long has it been?
been a couple months. I mean, we got to make it a thing.
Yeah, we did make it a thing, and we got busy with life. See, guys, sorry about that.
Thanks for joining me, buddy.
Yeah, of course, man. I always love sitting down and having our nice little evening talks.
Thanks for listening to LionHeart Radio. I hope that the information from today's show will make you fitter, happier, and healthier. For the show notes of this episode and every episode, head to www.lionheartrad.io. Yep, just like LionHeart Radio. And please, if you have the time, head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to know that we're on the right track and delivering you reliable information and value. As always, feedback is welcome. If you have any comments on the show or would like to suggest a guest, send me an email at rick@luavive.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Thanks for your support, and we will see you next time.
Bitch, I feel good. Don't I look stupendous? My shine is so endless, and shit you can do to end this. Even when I'm dead, niggas still gon' bump that chip shit. Coke, white, Escalade on cinches for you dipshit. So you won't forget this. Midwest nigga be the coldest. Cleveland.